Hey guys, and welcome back to another Shadow Priest Mythic Plus commentary video. For this video, as you can see by the title, this is a Mists 15 that we did, just one of our weekly keys, me and a bunch of friends, where I did 8.2k overall damage. So the reason I wanted to make this video specifically is I didn't run my typical Searing Nightmare Shadow Crash Khorane build, which I would normally run in Mists. Instead, I did what a lot of people are doing, and I ran Misery and Auspicious Spirits. And you'll see here in a second, I open up my talents right there. So yeah, you can see I'm running Misery and Auspicious Spirits. I'm also running Naya and Hungering Void. That's because this is a Tyrannical week. This is the Bolstering Storming week, Tyrannical. So I just wanted to show you this video in case anybody out there hasn't ever played Misery in a dungeon, or you're interested to see how even at these lower key levels, right? And there's a fire mage in the group, so I mean stuff is going to die really quickly. So even with all that, you can still do really good damage playing this new weird Misery build. And looking forward to the future, I think that in 9.1, Misery is going to be better than it is now. They're buffing our dot damage by 25% for each of the dots. So right now, when I play this Misery build, most of the damage comes from the shadowy apparitions, as well as like Devouring Plague and the Mindbender rifts. But most of the damage isn't from our dots themselves. It's just from the ghosts that we spawn because we have dots on stuff, right? But I think that might change going into 9.1. Having our dots do 25% more damage each is not a tiny change. And on top of that, dots get better the more haste and the more stats basically that you have. And going into 9.1, our secondary stats are just going to go up. So I think Misery might be a pretty safe bet going into 9.1. So into the key. On that first pack, I popped Mindbender. On the second pack, I pretty sure I popped. Oh no, so I think I popped Mindbender and Void Form on the very first pack. I might have even PI'd, but I figured that our Fire Mage and our Rogue were gonna do, a lot of damage on that last pull that we just had right there, and it turns out that our Holy Paladin actually did pretty much all the damage on that. So, good thing I didn't have my cooldowns up, I guess, kind of, but I'm a pretty big fan of popping your cooldowns on that first 5-pack rather than saving them for the big pull afterward where everybody pops cooldowns. But that's just because I don't want to pop cooldowns when everybody else is popping cooldowns. Although, depending on your team comp or whatever, sometimes it's not always the right play is what I'm saying. It's just it works for me a lot, so that's why I do it. So something I'll mention about our damage profile running Misery instead of Searing Nightmare and Shadow Crash is you're not going to have those moments where there's 20 mobs and you press Searing Nightmare 1,000 times and your damage just goes through the roof immediately and stays high for a really long time and then starts to fall off at the end when stuff starts dying. Instead, with this Misery build, it's a lot closer to the damage profile of the old Shadow Priest. Something these two Furious Thrashings are in sync, by the way. I thought that was pretty neat. No, so it's a lot closer to the old damage profile. For anyone who didn't play Shadow Priest before Shadowlands, Void Form used to not have a cooldown. It used to be you would go into Void Form, and then you'd have 100 insanity, and it would slowly drain. And the longer you're in Void Form, the faster your insanity drains. So the goal was just to make your Void Form last as long as possible. And then once you fell out of Void Form, you would want to get back into Void Form as fast as possible. You could get back into it as soon as you had, I think it was 60 insanity, something like that. But once you hit a certain amount of insanity, sweet dodge there, by the way. Once you hit a certain amount of insanity, you could go back into Void Form and start blasting damage again. And because of that, and because the way our apparitions worked, they used to come from crits of Shadow Word Pain. instead of being every time you cast Mind Blast or Devouring Plague or whatever, Devouring Plague wasn't around. So they came from every time your Shadow Word Pain ticked, if it crit, it would spawn a ghost, right? So the idea was you would spend as much time in Void Form as possible, and because you were in your cooldown, quote unquote cooldown window, Shadow didn't really have cooldowns back then, but because you were in Void Form a lot, it meant that your damage, instead of being really spiky, instead of doing a lot of damage during your cooldowns and then very little damage outside of your cooldowns, it was like you do a little more damage when you're in Void Form and a little less damage when you're out of Void Form, but it's constantly pretty high, right? So that's why people used to bring Shadow Priests to like anything that they would bring Shadow Priests to. It's because our damage was really consistent. If there was ever an ad that needed to die within 5 seconds, let's say, Shadow Priest was bad for that because we don't do really good burst damage. Unlike like right now, you can see I'm bursting pretty hard. I'm doing 16k damage, right? Granted, this guy's taking increased damage, but I'm bursting harder than our Fire Mage, right? So it's like Shadow Priest now can burst pretty decently as long as the burst is spread across, several seconds. But back in BFA and Legion, even Shadow didn't really have any burst. It was much more consistent, and that's how the damage profile of this Misery build uh, it's closer to that. So over the course of the dungeon, right, you're not gonna be like saving all your damage. Um, you're not gonna be saving it for those really really big pulls where you just peak to 40, 50k, right? Uh, that's one thing I'll also mention. Running this build, it felt like I didn't have as many super super high peaks, right? I had a lot of really high moments of damage, right? Like right now I'm doing 12k on this boss fight, and during I think this would be really good on fortified weeks as well, because during really big trash packs that live for a long time, uh, and give you enough time to generate a lot of shadows, right? A lot of apparitions. Um, when those packs are around, you can do really, really good damage, and your damage just ramps up and then stays really high for a long time. So yeah, I mean, instead of having these really, really high peaks and really low or mediocre like troughs, uh, this version of Shadow Priest running the Misery build, just because of the way it plays, right? You'll still have high moments, because you've still got Power Infusion and Void Form and Mindbender, and all of those things will do more damage when you use them than when you don't use them, right? So if you're not using any of your cooldowns, obviously your damage is going to be lower than if you were. So you still have like, you're not perfectly consistent over the whole key, but you're a lot closer than if you just play Searing Nightmare. So yeah, if that seems like a damage profile that fits your need, um, like your group has some really really high burst people, but they have really low damage outside of their burst windows, like a Fire Mage, right? Then a Shadow Priest is a nice complement to that, and this Misery build specifically is a nice complement to that because of the consistency, right? So that's all I'll say about the consistency thing. I've mentioned very little about the actual key, so I'll try to talk a little bit more about that. But I figure this far into the never-ending patch of 9.0, most people know kind of what's going on in these dungeons, right? So I don't really have to say, okay, yeah, so this stalker guy is going to jump on people and hurt really bad, right? Because everybody knows that Mistville bite that just made my screen flash like crazy. Everyone knows that hurts, right? Oh, there's a spear flurry that happens. You got to dodge that. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. Everyone knows. But if you look at the damage meter, I'm doing 10k DPS right now, um, and it's not because of like huge cooldowns, right? I popped Void Form. Actually, I don't think I did pop Void Form. I've got 26 seconds left on the cooldown, so I think that was all without Void Form, right? So pretty good damage. So it was a 4-pack, right? And I managed 8k for however long the pull was, which was not short for sure. Um, yeah, so it's not bad. So I'm gonna pop Power Infusion right here in my Soul Letting Ruby. For anyone who hasn't seen my most recent video, which I don't blame you. It's almost 2 hours long. But if you haven't seen it, um, in that video I went through a mists that one of my viewers sent in that he wanted some leak or whatever. So I talked about in that video how you use Soul Letting Ruby. If you use it when something is at low health, it gives you more crit than if you use it on something that has high health. Um, so I guess that wasn't the most common knowledge. So if you don't know, uh, now you know, right? You should be sniping stuff with your Shadow or Death, but also with your Soul Letting Ruby, because your Soul Letting Ruby gives you more crit depending on how much health the enemy is missing. So the more that it's missing, the more crit you get, right? This is the other thing I wanted to mention about this Misery build and why I think it's so good on this week specifically. Um, I guess Tyrannical Keys specifically, it's pretty good. I think it's the tank right there just trolled me. He jumped behind me with the tongue thing on purpose to smack me with it. But uh, because we play Auspicious Spirits, or because I'm playing Auspicious Spirits in this key, it means that my single target damage is going to be pretty good. Because instead of using Shadow Crash, which is not great for single target, right? It's not bad. I'll also mention I held my Void Form here. I saw that it was off cooldown, but I held it because I knew the Fire Mage was combusting this. See, he's doing like 30k DPS, and I'm only doing about 7k. These kind of decisions are very important to make on the fly. I saw him pop Combust. I was about to pop Void Form, but then I was like, this is a bad idea. So you don't want to be popping your cooldowns. And then right here, I'm gonna pop off because I've got all my cooldowns basically. So if you watch the DPS meters, I'm just using all of my apparition generating abilities. So Devouring Plagues, uh, Mind Blasts. I forgot the word for a moment. And my Void Bolts. And yeah, I'm doing 20k DPS to this 5-pack, right? So it's pretty good, and it could be really good if nobody else is popping stuff, right? And if these guys were to live longer, up until the end of my Void Form, really, that's about when I want them to die, because that's about where you're going to stop doing as much damage, right? Because you're outside of your cooldown window now. Yeah, but anyway, so we're just going to fight this Pride. Super easy. People have fought thousands of Prides by now. Like I mentioned in every video, Vampiric Embrace is really good for Pridefuls. I'm right there. I'm checking to see what was the source of most of my damage. It was Devouring Plagues and Spiteful or Shadowy Apparitions, right? Vampiric Embrace is really good during Prides to help keep everybody up. Although healers should be pretty well accustomed to Prides by now. But then yeah, you want to be running Translucent Image so that Fade is a cooldown, is a personal defensive cooldown, I should say. And then use Desperate Prayer if you get really low, because Desperate Prayer is two-sided. It has two effects. First, it heals you for 25% of your max HP. So if you're about to die, it will give you more HP, right? So it does heal you. And then secondly, it also increases your max HP by 25% of your current max HP, right? So let's say you've got 40,000 HP, right? That means 25% of that is a quarter of that, or 10k. So if you've got 40,000 max HP and you're in the middle of a fight or something, and you've been taking some hits, so you're down to 20k HP at the moment, you're at 50%, and you press Desperate Prayer, it's going to heal you 10,000, so you're at 30,000, and it's going to make your max HP be 50,000, right? So the reason it does that is because if you press it when you're at full health, they don't want you to not be at full health now, right? So if you press it when you're at full health, it raises your max HP by 25%, and then it increases your HP by that much so that you're still at full health, right? That's the intention, but because of that, you can also kind of cheese it and heal yourself, right? So it's a nice defensive cooldown. So yeah, you want to be running Translucent Image for your Fade. You want to be using your Desperate Prayer when you can, and keep those two effects in mind, because a lot of people either think that it just heals them or think that it just increases your max HP, but it actually does both, and it's important to know because you can use it two different ways, right? Sometimes it's good so that you can soak something, like a big mechanic is coming up and somebody needs to soak it, and you can't soak it with 40k HP, but you could soak it if you had 50k HP. So you press Desperate Prayer, you stand in it, soak it, it takes you down to 2k or whatever, but you live versus dying had you not pressed it. And then the other reason you would ever press it is uh, it heals you for 25% of your max HP, right? Right here is a really awkward moment. I just swapped to Goblin, so I've been trying to find good uses for Goblin Jump. And in the past, I always soul shape down to this acorn so that I could get down there faster, because soul shape, like a mage's blink, will teleport you to the nearest floor. Usually, as long as there's not as long as it's clear where it should teleport you. If you're like above a root like I was right there, sometimes it teleports you in midair and then you just fall to your death, which is kind of what happened there. So yeah, I've been trying to find nice places for Goblin Jump. Uh, that was a not great use of it. I think using Goblin Jump there is fine, but I think I should shoot more towards the middle of the water than over to the acorn, right? So anyway, moving on to the big pull. This is where everybody is going to pop all their cooldowns. Because I'm playing Misery, I'm going to put Vampiric Touch on all the elites if I can. So on my UI, those are the people with the stars by them. I put it on everything except for one right there. And then I'm going to pop all my cooldowns. There's no point in me putting Vampiric Touch on anything that's going to die really quickly, which is all of those larvae that are now dead, right, that you can't see. So the mage pops off right at the beginning, kills all the little stuff, and now I'm starting to fill in for when he's outside of Combust, and I can finish off all this stuff, right? So not a bad combo, right? Fire Mage combusting and me popping my stuff on the elites to finish it off seemed pretty good right there. So right here, I'm going to try and get those last two Shadow Flame Rifts onto this Manifestation of Pride. That's why I popped my Shadow Word Death and my Mind Blast. Now I'm just going to try and line up with these other guys in the diagonal where we're safe from the Prideful line. And then, yeah, again, you guys have seen Pridefuls 100,000 times, so I'm not going to say too much about it. I use my Dark Thoughts procs anytime that I'm, anytime that I'm either moving or I'm channeling something, Mind Flay or Mind Seer, but typically Mind Flay, because you can use it while you're channeling those. Also, I don't know if they've patched this yet because I haven't played Void Torrent in a long time. But you used to be able to, at the beginning of 9.0, you used to be able to cast your Dark Thoughts procs while you were channeling Void Torrent. So that would be worth checking if you're constantly playing Void Torrent, like maybe you're a Venthyr Shadow Priest or something, and you're using Void Torrent a lot. I would check if I were you and see if you can cast those Dark Thoughts procs while you're in Void Torrent channeling. And then yeah, right here I'm trying to snipe stuff with my Shadow Word Deaths, taking a lot of crazy damage from these super bolstered bugs. We did a triple pull, which is not typically recommended on bolstering weeks, but this is so me and 3 of the other guys in this group have been, are all like 227 plus item level. Me, the mage, and the healer. So I guess 2 other guys. So we're like killing all this stuff is not going to be hard. It just takes a little bit more time, right? If this was a key we were trying to like push really hard, then yeah, maybe we would not do that triple pull. Although I think it was a pretty good time save. And then right here at the end, we're going to pull this Prideful onto the boss just because all our cooldowns are up. Well, mine aren't completely up, but they'll be up soon. And yeah, there's no point not pulling it. We're all pretty healthy, feel pretty confident doing it. So yeah, hopefully you guys have found this Misery build pretty interesting. I think it's pretty sweet, and you can see I'm popping off right here, right? I'm doing 16k DPS. I almost die right here, but I popped Dispersion to keep myself alive. That's one of the super cool things about this Misery build. The reason I ran Naya is so that Naya and Hungering Void on top of Auspicious Spirits is really what makes my single target damage so good. Because Naya gives you Grove Invigoration, so every time you press your Fey Guardians, you get a huge Mastery stat stick. And then I'm playing Auspicious Spirit, which gives you more single target damage than Shadow Crash would. Then I'm also playing Hungering Void, which everybody knows is the go-to for single target, right? So it extends your Void forms longer every time you crit with a Void Bolt. So yeah, I think this build is pretty nice. I think there is room for it in a lot of other keys as well. I think there are specific affixes that make it really good. Like I think a high fortified key is not actually a bad place to use Misery like this, especially if you ever have a hard time keeping all the mobs in one place. Um, that's usually why people use Misery is like in Theater of Pain, where you got those guys that jump around a bunch. People use Misery there, but I think it's worth trying this build in other keys, right? So try, go out into a Plague Fall and try this build or something and see how you like it. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.